Utility maximization. At the end of this video, the following are expected to understand. A. Utility and price elasticity of demand are important concepts in explaining consumer behavior. B. Define utility maximization. And C. Understand the indifference curve. What do you mean by utility maximization? A utility maximization strategy is one that seeks to maximize the satisfaction of individuals and businesses when making economic decisions. Utility maximization is an optimization problem regarding a consumer utility function and their budget constraint. Individuals are faced through following problems. Faced for the set of choices for the bundles of goods and the given and fixed budget. How will they choose the basket that will maximize their utility? The best way to maximize utility is to spend every dollar you spend on the item with the greatest marginal utility per dollar of expenditure if you want to maximize total utility. Utility maximization is an important concept in classical economics. Early economists such as Alfred Marshall incorporated utility maximization into economic theory. What is the importance of utility maximization? Consumers are able to allocate their income in a way that is beneficial to them. Rationally, they seek to maximize their own benefits. What is the utility maximizing rule in economics? According to the utility maximization rule, consumers allocate their money incomes to maximize the amount of extra marginal utility they can derive from each purchase. In the sense that it is equalized, it is marginal utility per dollar spent. What is the utility maximizing condition? The condition of the sphere is to be measured. That is why it is important to allocate the income to maximize the utility. To obtain the greatest utility to each good or service that he or she spent on. What is utility and why is it important? The utility function is an important concept in economics that measures preferences over a set of goods and services in terms of utility. Utility maximization can be formulated as an equation where the utility for given good or X is maximized, subject to monetary constraints such that the price P of the good multiplied by the amount bought X is lower or equal to the available budget M. This equation is general, thus we modify the equation in order to analyze a situation with two goods. The second formula is commonly used in order to facilitate its graphical representation. The horizontal x-axis shows the amount of excess X1 good consumed. The vertical x-axis shows the amount of excess X2 consumed. The indifference curve drawn in light blue joins point with the same utility level. The convexity of the curve shows our taste on the variety. Every unit increase of the good will have a smaller effect in utility than the previous marginal increases. The level of utility increases more, the more upward the indifference curve is set. Therefore, we would like to choose a bundle of goods on the highest possible indifference curve. However, sadly, we are always limited by monetary constraint, also called a personal budget constraint. This green line represents the personal budget constraint. Only bundles that line side or on the line representing the budget constraint are feasible. However, not all of them report the same level of utility, and in fact, only one combination of goods will report the highest possible utility to the consumer. Therefore, we should choose the one that reports us greatest utility level given the monetary constraint. As we can see, we could choose different indifference curves. However, there is only one that meets both conditions of highest utility and budget compliance. This optimization solution will be located at the exact point where the budget constraint line is tangent to the indifference curve. Noted that, in the case shown, given the properties of the budget constraint and the utility function, one and only one solution is possible. The bundle of goods that maximizes the utility while complying the budget constraint will be composed of the equilibrium amount of the good 1 and good 2. At this point, the marginal rate of substitution quoted as MRS, which is equal to the slope of the indifference curve, will be equal to the price of the first good divided by the price of the second one, which is the slope of the budget constraint. Why is utility important in economics? It is important to understand the economic utility of a good or service since it directly affects the demand and therefore the price of that good or service. Utility maximization also has its limits. First is ordinal utility. In ordinal utility, consumers find it hard to give exact values of utility, but they can order by preference. Ordinal utility theory claims that it is only meaningful to ask which option is better than the other, but it is meaningless to ask how much better it is or how good it is. All of the theory of consumer decision-making under conditions of certainty can be, and typically is, expressed in terms of ordinal utility. For example, you prefer buying instant noodles rather than cooking your own noodles, meaning you don't calculate the exact levels of utility upon deciding. Irrational behavior can lead to market failure, loss of economic welfare, and personal issues such as drug addiction and poor health. Cognitive bias occurs when we make irrational decisions but often are unaware of our own irrationality. For example, we may focus on a study that says 1 glass of red wine a day is good for health and then make the assumption that any quantity of alcohol can be good for us. In making decisions, we use mental shortcuts or heuristics. These decisions are based on impulsive emotional responses. For example, if we have one bad experience traveling on British Airways, we may also or always avoid them in the future. Herding, or also called as the wisdom of the crowds. Herding is a situation where individuals assume that the majority must be correct. Therefore, even if we are wary of buying shares in South Sea Company, we think if everyone else is, they must know something. Irrational exuberance. Irrational exuberance is a term to describe over-optimism, especially about asset bubbles. For example, if shares rise and people see an increase in wealth, this may encourage them to keep buying more. If prices rise above their long-term value, we can think this time is different, and perhaps there is some reason for the increased value of shares. Sunk cost fallacy are the things that you bought but then later on regret buying it. For example, if you have bought a machine for 10,000 pesos and it is not profitable to use, the rational action is to sell and cut your losses. But we can become attached to our past decisions, and for some reasons of pride, we try to make our decisions work, even though we just create a bigger problem. Sunk cost fallacy means placing too much importance on sunk cost or irretrievable cost that cannot be got back. Lack of control. Another irrational behavior may stem from a lack of control. A drug addict may wish to stop his habit, but the power of addiction makes it difficult to achieve. Rationally, we may want to stick to a diet and lose weight, but we get tempted by the pleasure of the present moment. Present bias. Present bias is when we place relatively greater value on consumption in the present moment. In simple terms, it may be rational to save for a pension. Example, life cycle hypothesis suggests we should try to smooth consumption over a lifetime. However, in practice, around 25% of individuals fail to plan adequately. Discrimination. In labor markets, firms can discriminate against certain types of workers, such as age, gender, and race. If you refuse to employ a good worker, then it means less profit for the firm. But we can be motivated by these human prejudices rather than the utility maximization of economic theory. Demerit goods. Demerit goods are damaging to individuals, but people continue to consume, either unaware or ignoring their harmful effects. For example, heavy drinking can cause health problems, but many people drink heavily. Taking illegal drugs like heroin can ruin a life, but some people choose to get addicted and then regret it later.